Good evening, everybody. Welcome to this week's episode of Keeping the Beacon Lit. I am your host, A.B. Timothy. I am a fantasy writer who has been writing fantasy and science fiction for over 12 years. I am deeply in love with the idea of storytelling and writing as a whole, and thus wish to share it with the world and bring others along on the journey with me, which is what this show is all about, is taking others, like my fellow author here, Matthew Krell, and allowing them to help myself inspire up and coming artists, authors, and storytellers more broadly. Uh, and that is the heart of this show. It is to help keep the beacon lit, not only to light our paths ahead, but also to help guide those coming up behind us in the darkness. With that, I think I'll give my friend here a chance to introduce himself. So, Matthew Krell, who are you and why should we care?
Yeah, I am a Protestant monk, or at least that's how I would most closely identify what I am. Um, I am part of a Protestant religious order that was founded kind of in the early '90s. Basically, my father and um, you know his wife, obviously, and a number of other families got together and started an intentional Christian community. Um, and they were all originally members of a missionary group, and so basically a revival happened. They got together, started a intentional community, started a common person. I was born, and then over the years, we've seen ourselves as being something like Protestant monks and just dedicated to living out the gospel among our brothers and sisters and kind of devoting ourselves to the different tenets of um, the monastic tradition, stability, um, generosity, that sort of thing. So yeah, that's what I am. Professionally, I'm a programmer, but recently I've taken up writing because it's always been an interest in mine. And somewhat recently, I had a really interesting idea and decided, you know what, I'm just going to go for it and try to get this project life goal done. And yeah, and so far it's been great. And yeah.
Very cool. So that kind of begs the question a little bit. Who in your life inspired you the most to start writing fiction?
Huh. It's storytelling has always been a part of my life. Um, I always had lots of encouragement, of course, from friends and family. That wasn't never really the issue. But I think the person who's probably most responsible for inspiring me to be who I am in the ethereal realm would be Richard Adams and his book Watership Down. Um, what's so fascinating about that book is besides it just being a very excellent book about rabbits trying to found a new colony is Adams is an Anglican and deeply religious Christian, and he's also exploring a modernist understanding of how God interacts with the world. And so, even though as you as a human are viewing all these events that are happening to these rabbits from a human lens and kind of understand what is going on better than they do, like rabbits see like a train and they think it's an angel from the sun god, right? And you can be kind of cynical that way. On the other hand, there's many other things that are happening that are very clearly have their source from outside any explanation that you know of. And so the world feels very enchanted and infused with the life of God. And that really inspired me. And I often tell people that the thing that I'm interested in writing is the concept of an encounter of the normal meeting the numinous, the ordinary meeting the extraordinary. Whether that is the divine or not, is just one of those things.
Okay, cool. So you're looking at things from a more modern perspective, it sounds like, but still trying to weave religiosity and not necessarily in maybe a explicit manner, but in a sort of implicit manner, um, at that sort of liminal point, that liminal space where the known and the unknown, the the objective observable fact meets the objective unobservable fact, and
Hmm.
they kind of have to figure out how they can coexist. That's cool.
Yeah, I mean, one way I might put it is I find myself gravitating towards the same kind of universe that I believe Tolkien and Lewis were heading towards
Hmm.
in their own way, where it's the kind of the regaining of the old way of seeing the world that we had in the Middle Ages, right? Like Lewis actually has a really interesting essay on this. I don't remember what it's called, but you can find it. It's in one of his books, Present Concerns, I think, where he points out that we originally had this very enchanted way of seeing the world, with God working and operating in the universe, and every tree and forest and stream being infused with the spirit of a dryad or something, that kind of thing. And then the scientific revolution comes along, and then we lose that. But there's another more mature perspective after the end of that, where that gets the scientific understanding of the universe gets incorporated into our religious understanding of the universe, and we no longer bifurcate the world between science and religion, so to speak. It just becomes one integrated whole with God. And sometimes in the orthodox circles online, you'll hear that word being described as re-enchantment. I find
Hmm.
myself kind of heading in that direction. That's the kind of thing I'm interested in.
Yeah, that makes sense. The re-enchantment, the reintroduction of the fantastical. Um, that's something a lot of authors kind of just sort of implicate in their stories is a an understanding of the supernatural. Um, and this podcast isn't about me, but like I'm thinking of an example in my book where my main character interacts with a what is essentially a river dryad
Mm.
and doesn't freak out. Like he doesn't like his mind isn't blown that there's some kind of angelic being coming out of the river because he's a total humanist and believes that nothing exists outside of what he can observe. He believes in the spirit realm. He believes in the mystical and the more fantastical, just out of your um just out of the fact that he exists in a time where there isn't modern technology to record things or to you know measure things the same way we have today, and so he is more open to that. And I feel like a lot of fantasies do the same, and I'd imagine yours does this too, where it's like the characters are implicitly more open to the fantastical because that's part of um their not etymological, but actually the opposite of etymological, whatever that word is, kind of just part of their reality, their
Yeah,
baseline
exactly.
reality.
They wouldn't even consider it being supernatural necessarily. It's just, co-contiguous with how the created order works. There are fairies, right? The Fae people, the liminal people exist. They have certain command over the elements and life, and there is no other explanation than the fact that they are Fae. Same thing
Hmm.
with demons. Same thing with angels, right? It's not they don't have a separation between the scientific realities, things that we can verify with a test tube and a microscope, and magical things that just happen because someone willed it into existence, right? That doesn't exist in their worldview. It's all just one thing. So to me, like, having your character see a river dryad, that makes total sense, because to any Christian there, the fairies were real in Ireland.
Yep.
They existed. It's just that
Especially
you
in
didn't have to
Ireland.
worship
Yeah.
them or fear them.
Yeah. True. Good point. So
And I'd
speaking
say they still
of,
exist. They do
well,
exist.
yeah, oh, 100%. I mean, like there's unexplainable things that happen all the time. Even the Bible says, live your life a certain way because you don't know when you're entreating angels unaware. And so,
Exactly.
like, you gotta, live a good life, be a good person, not because it's what gets you into heaven. God's grace alone does that, but because of how it could affect your standing in the afterlife, or even just how it affects your standing with your fellow humans, to be honest.
Yeah, and the scriptures talk about like the battle in the heavenlies, right? Like our actions here on
Yes,
earth, excuse me, have effects in, other dimensions and planes of existence that we do not know about.
very true. Very true. So, speaking of life and living life, and living it properly, I do want to know, because this is not just a writing show necessarily. This is also about the author, who is Matthew C. Krell. I want to know, like, what is life like for a Protestant monk in the USA in the big 26, in the big 2026? What is it like living that sort of separated monastic lifestyle?
So, a friend of mine was inviting some coworkers to come visit once, and she said, and they were asking her how, like, "Hey, what do you what should we expect when you come?" And she said, You should expect it to be disappointingly normal."
Fair enough.
I mean, literally, I'm wearing like just some lined pants and a sweatshirt. You can see my picture online. I've got a, a, a Tolkien, head thing. I don't wear any fancy robes or nothing. Like you just find me out in the street. Like I just look like some random millennial hipster guy. Talk to me for 3 seconds. You're going to think I'm a software engineer because I am.
Hmm,
Right, like, you wouldn't notice anything being particularly different, which is both a blessing and a curse, because in one sense, being part of a religious order, it would be kinda nice if you had some kind of way to distinguish yourself.
sure.
But, like, it doesn't bother me too much, but, yeah, anyway, it's just interesting. But, yeah, so what it actually does look like in practice, though, is that I live on a single property with a bunch of other people. We have apartments, basically, different families live in those. And then we follow a very structured life where we get up at certain times and do our uh, a chapel, and then we have meals together, and we're praying liturgical prayers at those meals, and then of course we just do a lot of things together. Every Friday we have some usual events that we invite the public to, and we're playing board games or whatever. We sometimes put on presentations to the wider public. We actually had a friend of ours come recently and do a talk on Beethoven, and you can find that on well, you can't find it now because I'm still editing it. But anyway, we also had him do a talk on Wagner. You can find that on YouTube. Anyway, but yeah, so I tell people that it is really disappointingly normal, because we are just kind of just ordinary people just living life, and we just happen to be living life in close proximity to each other. But it is different in that we have regular hours where we're praying. We have liturgies that we're praying together. We have events that we're doing at certain times together. So it is in that sense a lot more structured than just average American life.
Sure. So what you're telling me, just kind of to summarize, is you aren't walking around in lines in the town square slapping yourself with a wooden board
No.
in a hooded robe. No, that's terribly disappointing. Okay, but that's cool. So, when it comes to those kind of things, like, are you guys on a church property too? Like, do you guys host regular Sunday services for the public,
Oh
or
yeah.
is it?
Oh yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
and the services are open to the public. We do have a members only meeting after the service, but yes, we do have regular church services and all those good things.
And with it being Protestant monk, and with you having a father who purportedly or assumedly is part of this order, I'd assume
Mhm.
that means you guys don't hold to the like the chastity situation of like more Catholic
Well,
monks.
chastity, yeah, chastity. Great question. Yeah, chastity in the
Chastity is the
general
wrong
sense,
word. I
obviously, in the general
apologize.
Christian
Yes,
sense.
chastity is the wrong word
Yeah,
there. I apologize. But
no, no,
yes,
no, that's fine. That's kind of the problem with that word, is that the word chastity means like two separate things. One of them is, are you living chastely, and that you're obeying what the Bible says about sexual ethics. But then it also means, are you, a virgin, or are you, not being married, or having kids and all that, right? So when you say, do you take a vow of chastity, that's what people usually mean is that second half. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah, so we don't, in the Protestant interpretation of, um, monasticism or these sort of things, a vow of chastity really just means that you're following the ordinary Christian understanding of sexual ethics. It doesn't mean you can't have kids, right? So we have families here, and we've got lots of children. I, of course, literally grew up here, so yeah, that is one of the things that makes us more unique.
Totally. Yeah, and that definitely would set you apart as a Protestant monk as opposed to a more classical, like medieval Catholic monk. Well,
Right.
and that's a conversation we can get into later about like medieval versus modern, and there's
Oh
some
yeah.
stuff there because the research that I've done is the laws requiring clergymen to, or the not laws, but the dogma requiring clergymen to not take uh earthly wives and not have children and whatever. Those didn't come into play until the Middle Ages, until well
Right.
after the Roman Church was established and ubiquitous throughout Europe. So that'd be an interesting conversation to have. But
Yeah, I mean, I actually was literally just reading something about that from Tom Holland's Dominion. No, wait,
okay,
he mentions it in there, but there's another book he wrote, The Forge of Christendom, where he talks about how that happened, how Gregory got that whole reform started. Very fascinating stuff.
definitely. Well, still on the monastic lifestyle a little bit, but kind of more towards the writing. How would you say that this monastic life has affected your writing habits slash even the content of your writing, perhaps?
Yeah. Um, the biggest way I think is the way in which I want to restate that. It's because a lot of my life is devoted to study. We're always reading and learning, and that sort of thing. Um, I would say that the stories that I'm interested are probably more informed than, and you take this the right way, the lay Christian, right?
Hmm.
Because we are kind of armchair theologians by necessity. And so a lot of the thinking that I've done about the faith inevitably winds up in the stories that I write. Um, a more practical means, though, is that when you're living with a lot of other people, especially people whom you would not normally associate with, you tend to rub shoulders and bump each other a lot, and poke each other's porcupine spines. And that social interaction has, I think, informed a number of aspects of the current story I'm writing, because um, there are several smaller societies of approximately the same kind of number of people that I live and work with every day. It's not a direct one-to-one comparison in the book to real life, but I think I have in that sense an understanding of how these sort of things work because I actually live in one. If that helps.
Hmm. So I've read a little bit of your first chapter, and maybe it gets expanded or it's different in later on in the book. But in the first chapter, it kind of seems like that situation where like it's very close quarters, very cramped
Yeah.
of necessity because they're underground. But so that your lifestyle living in that sort of cramped and not necessarily cramped in a bad way, but just togetherness.
Yeah, no. Yeah,
And
it's not a wrong way to describe it. I mean, I would not call it cramped. I would just call it full of life. It's
sure,
not physically cramped either. We have plenty of space.
that's good. That's good to hear. Yeah, I mean, and so that kind of has informed how you've gone about writing those situations in your book. I mean, that makes a lot of sense. That's pretty cool.
Right.
So, recently on X, you've uh talked a little bit about and you've pushed back sort of against the idea that anything pre-modern would look ugly to modernize. You and I kind of
Are
talked
we
about this a
talking
little
about
bit.
this video game that's coming out there, the
Well,
Knight's Path or whatever?
in part, yes, but also I saw there was somebody who did like an AI re-rendering of a character, I think from Fable perhaps or something, where
Okay.
they made them beautiful, and somebody else had quote tweeted it and said, "Well, this is ridiculous because people of those days would have looked ugly because it's realistic, it's not modern, it's not modern beauty standards." And then, of course, you linked to your own comment about that painting from the Middle Ages in, I think you said, Florence. And so, like, I wanted to ask, like, in that respect, how important is beauty to you as an artist? You've pushed back against those things,
Hmm.
those ideas of pre-modernness being ugly. So,
Hmm.
talk to us a little bit about how beauty, um, and maybe even like how you implement it in your book.
So I don't know what the philosophical term is. There is one. But basically, there's three things that everyone always thinks are valuable and good, and that is the good, the true, and the beautiful, right? If you try to explain why those things are worth pursuing, it's impossible, right? Why should you pursue the good? Because it's the good. Why
Mm,
should you pursue the truthful? Because it's the truth. Why should you pursue beauty? Because it's beautiful, right? It explains itself. So as an artist, for me, that my entire goal in life is to show other people the beauty that I have seen. So, yeah, it's deeply important. Now, whether that translates into physical human beauty or not, that's a completely different discussion. But I do think that it is not a coincidence that the proliferation of plain or even ugly characters that we might see in video games or movies or who knows, it doesn't matter, may be a direct consequence of the fact that we are ugly in a lot of other ways, ugly morally or
mm.
aesthetically, right? Th- this is where I think a lot of people might get their pitchforks out, but I prescribe to the understanding that aesthetic judgment is connected to moral judgment.
Mm.
For example, if someone, hmm, I'm trying to think of, uh, this is a family show, so I can't use too explicit examples here, but um,
Sure.
if someone really likes a movie that is just unrelentingly graphic or explicit, right? And there's very little of artistic value in that film. And he says it's the most amazing thing ever. Would you think to yourself that that person is probably a morally upstanding individual?
Probably not. So,
Exactly.
and I think that that's a really great observation. Um, and it can even happen in more personal circles. Like, I
Hmm.
really liked the movie Superman that came out recently.
Oh, really? I haven't seen
It
it
was
either.
last summer. It was James Gunn's take on Superman. So
Hmm.
maybe it was a bit more funny than the previous Supermans have been, but I liked it because it was full of hope. It was full of
Hmm.
very clear and very obvious good and evil, and there wasn't gray. People weren't worrying about, like, oh, was Thanos doing actually a good thing? It's like, no, like Lex Luthor is clearly an evil man doing an evil thing.
Wasn't
Um
that, unrelenting DC Snyderverse thing?
Yeah, no, it wasn't that. It was much more bright, much more lively. There were dark parts, but it was black and white in the sense that the parts that were dark were very obviously and clearly dark. The parts
Hmm.
that were bright, and as the turn of phrase would be, the white parts, quote unquote, were very obviously white and upbeat and full of hope. And to me, it did a good job of entertaining the adults in the audience, keeping them engaged and entertained. But also, get this, it's a superhero movie. It's for kids. So it also kept them engaged by being a little bit brain rotty at times, maybe, but funny and humorous where it needed to be, and
Hmm.
lighthearted. But it taught the children in the audience that, yes, there are evildoers, but there are also supermen whose job it is to stop the evildoers. And that sort of baseline reality of a very lacking in nuance, is a very, you know uh how do I put this, a very, generic kind of entertainment of superhero movies. And so my friend, who is much more of a movie critic than I am, didn't really like the movie very much because there wasn't much meat to like dig into.
Hmm.
And so he probably thought of me or thought less of me as a movie critic because I liked that movie and he didn't.
That's a
And
great point.
and so, back to your point on aesthetics, if someone if someone is openly like uh ranting and raving about, like, I don't know, the realistic gore in the new Mortal Kombat, or they're talking about this grunge metal, like completely incomprehensible music kind of vibe that they appreciate, and oftentimes I have found too that they're like real life, like personal, like personage will reflect their morality. So
Sure.
like the people that I've met that are really into those kinds of like gory or grungy kind of darker things, they're usually also exactly who you expect them to be, like in their looks, in how they carry themselves, in how they talk. And so there is something to be said for liking beauty, and it's really difficult not to get political, but I am a conservative and this is a Christian show for the most part. It's really difficult, I believe, to find a beautiful feminist or to find a um ugly Christian, even like a Christian who's truly like doing their best to live for God. And obviously there's people who sin, and gluttony
Definitely.
is a huge problem in the church, but like
Oh yeah.
it's there is something to be said. And I'll turn it back over to you because this is supposed to be a show for you. So,
Sure. Sure. Sure.
but that idea is totally spot on, I think, of someone's uh aesthetic pleasures totally and very obviously relating to their moral either upstandedness or failures.
Yeah, but what's important to note is that, like, okay, so you like a dumb movie. That doesn't necessarily mean you're a bad person,
No, no,
right?
no.
They are different axes, but maybe the reasons why you like something, it again, it's a very good person who's like totally, in love with the Lord, and he does many amazing things for God and for Jesus and for goodness and all the whole skit, right?
Mm-hmm.
He could like a really dumb movie that's bad or has a lot of bad ideas in it or something like that. Okay, well, that doesn't, in a sense, it does reflect on his moral character, but it doesn't mean he's a bad person. It just might mean that it might indicate that they have a lack of moral wisdom. You know what I mean?
True.
Right?
Yeah.
Like a child likes a movie because it's got lots of explosions and action sequences. Is it bad to like a movie with tons of explosions and action sequences? No. But their taste is not matured because they're a child. And that's fine. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
And you know what? It's totally fine if you just want to, like, I'm tired. I just need something to rest, and like I just want to watch Superman blow some stuff up. Okay, you know what? That's fine, dude. Go knock
Totally.
yourself out. But you see my point here. So I think people take that observation in much too black and white terms.
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, it's like I don't think you should judge anyone based off of their well, I shouldn't say you shouldn't judge them, but I should say that you shouldn't rule on someone based solely on their
Yes,
media intake.
yes,
Is
absolutely.
it part of the judgment you make, and what eventually the ruling comes out as? Probably, but you should, if you're interested in investing in someone, like you should be more engaged than that. For
No,
example,
absolutely.
like
Learning what
yeah,
other people like and why they like it is a fantastic way to get to know them, but it's also a way that you yourself are nourished and, expanded in your character. Because oftentimes the reason you think, oh, that movie's just absolutely terrible. Okay, here's a good example. Okay, anime. I'm not
mm,
terribly versed in anime, so someone can correct me on this, but like, anime tends to be kind of hammy at sometimes. And I could say that that was a terrible because I'm used to like Shakespeare or something. Well, no, it's just a style. You see what I mean? So you have to be like a little hands off in that sense when you're trying to judge the aesthetics of something because you could be wrong.
that's true. And as humans, we are wrong quite often sometimes.
Yeah.
If you asked Grammarly, they probably would refrain from answering because they just, yeah, Listen, it doesn't help that every time I go to edit a chapter, Grammarly has to find over 200 errors in my work. So,
Good
uh,
lord.
yeah, Grammarly's like, this guy's a complete moral failure. He's less than the dirt, but no. So, very cool. So that makes a lot of sense with the beauty and um the aesthetic pleasure and having that be a part of your judgment of somebody. That's
Hmm.
an interesting take. So, um now I wanted to sort of open the floodgates for real this time, and I wanted to ask you, and kind of hand the mic over to you for however long you want to go for. Tell me about your story.
Sure.
Tell me who the main character is, what struggle they undergo to fulfill their arc, who the main antagonist is. Not necessarily like the antagonist of the universe, but like the one that your main character has to, battle against. And
Hmm.
if there is any, like uh, what is the story or the message you're trying to get across in the work?
Yeah. Okay. So the elevator pitch is that the book is about a planet of space elves who've lost their son, and the main character is a girl who is a slave in this society. Because yes, these elves have slaves. Who really wants to see stars but can't, because obviously she lives underground. That's not a problem for her because as an elf, she is immortal. But the closest time that it's going to take for them to reach another star will be like 3 million years. So to her, that's never. Um, what happens uh, immediately after she gives up on that dream is her aunt mysteriously disappears somehow. Basically, she injures herself and they whisk her off to a hospital in a bigger colony underground, and she never sees her. Um, so she wonders what's on earth is going on, and as she's trying to figure out information, she gets the sense that there might be certain secrets being held from her, but she doesn't know for sure. Um, and then she has a dream, and something tells her how to escape. And she escapes from the colony. And as she's doing so, she knows that there is some presence that's following her. And then by accident, she reaches the surface of the planet, which turns out is warm again because they have reached another star. Um, and then, of course, the story unfolds from there. So yeah, that's kind of what the basis of the story. Um, but the things I have often talked about, though, is what makes it fascinating and interesting is that presence that is leading her, because that presence is actually the god of death. It's Anubis, or as Anu, as he's called. Um, and what is the god of death doing on a planet full of immortal beings? Right? That doesn't make sense. So something very interesting to think about. But yeah, so um, that's what the story is about, from a plot perspective. And if I had advertised it, that's what I would say. What is I think the story is really about is a particular symbolic pattern that I have noticed both in my life um and the scriptures as well. That anytime you want to get life, you have to die a little bit. That there's always this up and down pattern that you experience in
Mm-hmm.
life. Every time I've grown as an individual was because someone had to chew me out because I was being a jerk. Or, I had to go and confess to my spiritual director or something. Uh or, I had to work out a lot and be tired because I wanted to get stronger, right? It's a very well-known pattern that in order to gain, you have to lose a little bit. And the reason this stuck in my head, and I've been observing that, was because somewhat recently, my grandmother passed away, and I was thinking about death and that sort of thing, and her own life and such. And that's when the idea for the book suddenly just leapt out at me. I was walking back to my apartment at the monastery, and I was turning over this phrase, "twin suns burning," in my head, and thinking, okay, so like if that was a story, what would it be about? And all of a sudden, I had this image of a girl kneeling in a desert, shielding her eyes from a binary star in the sky. And so I was wondering, like, okay, what on earth is going on there? And out of that came this a story of this planet of space elves who lost their son, and then all of a sudden Anubis leapt into it, and I had to figure out why he was there.
True. Okay. So it sounds like then the antagonist, so to speak, is not necessarily any one individual, but sort of the what they have to overcome. It's sort of the journey itself
A
is the
bit.
antagonist.
There actually is an antagonist. I did fail to mention him because he doesn't become the antagonist until much later in the story. Um, if you don't mind, I could
Yeah, go for it.
go into him. Right, yeah. So the other there's kind of three main characters. The third one doesn't show up until shortly after the main character Ellis reaches the surface of the planet. But the second main character is the master's son, and his name's Anton. And he becomes the antagonist for a slightly different reason. Um, as an immortal elf and a master in this slave society, he doesn't have a lot of motivation to do anything really, because in his mind, why don't we just wait for everything to warm up upstairs? It's going to take 3 million years. It takes 3 million years. Who cares, right? Like, there's no reason for me to better myself or do anything of any sort here, right now. But he, by accident, learns the truth about why everything is actually warm upstairs, and the unspoken secret that exists within their colony. And then shortly after that, um, gets an accident where he is now has a hard deadline on his life, and he's probably only lived for maybe a year or so. Um, so he kind of takes on a different exploration of the core symbolic pattern about dying and coming to life again, and where he kind of I might say this, he represents the kind of person who would die once and says, okay, I'm good, I don't have to do
Mm.
anything more, I got enough life, right? And so he becomes the antagonist later, but only more as like a kind of a Faustian antagonist, someone to tempt the main character, Ellis in this case, into doing things that she know would be wrong.
Sort of an embodiment of sloth, almost. It sounds like.
Sloth at the start, yeah, but then
Yeah,
actually something more like self-preservation towards the end.
selfishness. Would you put it that way?
Self-preservation.
Okay. Preserve. So self-preservation isn't always a bad thing, but you're saying
Oh no.
self-preservation against the option of self-sacrifice, or what?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Self-preservation. Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
So um, it's like the devil tempting Christ. Throw yourself off this temple and have the angels catch you, or don't and fulfill your
Absolutely.
purpose. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, what's kind of one of the interesting things is that the devil in this story, because there are spiritual entities, as you can guess, is represented by a snake. And what's one fascinating pattern I've noticed in the book is that as characters go on, they become associated with certain um, other spiritual beings in the story and begin to take on, in a sense, the likeness of those spiritual beings. And this character becomes takes on the likeness of a snake, a Satan,
Right.
because he is embodying those symbolic patterns. It's really fascinating.
Well, that makes sense. I mean, even in real life, we sort of become who we orient ourselves towards. There's some
Yeah,
research that says that you as a person are essentially the sum and the average of the five people you hang out with the most. So
that's interesting.
there's some interesting like research that they did about that. Your friend group affects you while you also simultaneously affect your friend group. So it's kind of
That's interesting.
yeah, it's a really cool idea, especially to like looking at stories that talk about groups and sort of fellowships as they go on adventures and quests and things, and how the characters interact and influence each other. um yeah, and like I said, I've had you on the show a couple of times. This is sort of the first time I'm doing an author showcase here, and I'm one of the reasons that I wanted to have you on so early, even though you're not like published, you don't necessarily have a big name behind yourself or anything. I'm just like fascinated by your work generally, like your uh spiritual themes and your takes on X. Those are always fun to read, and Um,
I hope they are.
yeah. Well, at least they're fun. They're fun for somebody at least. So speaking of being published, so you and I have been discussing formatting in our DMs. I know, for myself, I'm close to publishing. I'm planning on publishing in May.
Hmm.
But you were the first to reach out to me. Like you extended that olive branch and sort of asked me about formatting originally. So, does this mean you're close to publishing? Like, can we expect some kind of some
I'm
kind of
hoping, man.
like
The
stealth
the
tactical
goal
nuke?
is to get this thing. The goal is to get this thing out in the spring.
Dude,
Um,
legendary.
I don't know if I'm gonna be able to do it though. I may end up delaying it to like making the release date midsummer this year. Um, because symbolically that would make a lot of sense with the story because there is a lot of midsummer symbolism that's in the book. Again, almost by accident.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, so my goal is to get the thing self-published out by the spring. I don't know what I'm doing for marketing though. I'm trying to see if I can generate some interest beforehand, but this is X. You don't find readers here, so I'm just gonna have to just cross my fingers and try a couple like Facebook ads or something.
Yeah. It.
And you know what? Like, and the other thing too is like the ability to make money on this industry is impossible practically. So I'm
Hmm.
just doing it for the love of the game.
Well, I mean, that's actually that was my next question. Like, what did you hope to accomplish with the publishing of your work?
Yeah, I mean, to me, the presence of a story that I knew was good is kind of enough for me in that sense. Like,
Hmm.
I think I've said on here this platform a while back, like I'm just trying to make something worthy of my father's fridge, right? Um,
Valid.
yeah, so that helps kind of keep the any potential disappointment I will face down. But also I have this thought like, you know, let's just go for it. Just try stuff. Just do everything I can do to try to be successful in the way I know how. And if I'm not, okay, whatever. But at least I tried. And that's good. And so to me, like my goal is to get some people to read the book that I don't know about. And that would be great to me if that actually happened. But like, did I make money off of this? Well, heck no. I think I'm in year 4 of writing this, so like, no, there's
Yeah.
no way I'm making money off of this. But yeah, it's mostly just hey, let's get people to read something that's interesting, and we'll see where it goes.
Cool. Okay. Um. So in other than your writing, I am curious. Like, are you still in school? Are you pursuing higher education, or are you just kind of happy with where you are, education wise?
Yeah. So I'm not actually pursuing any higher education. I haven't really. The opportunity for that, if it existed, probably passed, but
Hmm.
it also hasn't really been necessary. Given that I work in software engineering, it's a very odd industry where you probably don't need to go to like college for that sort of thing. Because you can pretty much just teach yourself on your own watching YouTube videos or go to lots of amazing websites out there like boot.dev to get like hard practical skills that would make you immediately useful. I know people who've worked with people who came out of like coding boot camps and such, and they hit the ground running way better than any person they found coming out of like a university for that. It's not an industry that requires a lot of that higher education. Now that's not always true. I actually have a friend who is going to a university for computer science, but he's doing that mostly in like the AI research kind of things because when you're kind of in that universe and trying to do some of this higher research stuff, then it makes sense to do that sort of thing. So yeah, not really.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, that makes a lot of sense. It's like you could teach yourself to read and read good books and talk about good books with your friends on your own time, and you don't need higher education for that. And you could
Right.
even, do a YouTube channel or whatever and talk about books for a living if you could convince people to pay you for it. So you don't need to do that, but the like you said, the more academic side, the sort of the research side. If you want to be taken seriously, like as a novel critic or as an academic, there is something to be said for um the prestige of having little letters after your name and stuff.
Oh yeah, certainly. Um, but this is the funny thing though. Like, do you get the impression that that might be changing somewhat? Because
Hmm.
you can find people like Metatron on YouTube, who isn't well, he is trained like trained. He was a teacher and he knows several languages and such, and he has like actual academics on his behind the scenes team helping him research stuff. But he's
Yeah.
not normally a research guy, but he knows like in many respects a lot more about his subject matter than many professors that he interacts with occasionally, and they often get very upset with him because he's not one of the in crowd. So, like, to me, I almost wonder if the full democratization of information that we've experienced because of the internet has changed that somewhat.
I would agree, but I think the the niche part there is um the people who Metatron finds that he disagrees with oftentimes are the ones who are merely regurgitating what they've been taught and aren't
Mm,
necessarily doing the thinking for themselves.
mm,
Like for myself, I plan to be a doctor of English, a professor in the more traditional
ooh,
sense, like someone who professes English. And my goal isn't necessarily to go and have my head filled with a whole bunch of s- speeches from professors, but rather it's my goal to go and research books and study them myself and do my own work, um to make myself more legitimate. And I guess, like, in a way, I'm doing what you're talking about, just in the more classical setting. Like, I could stop going to school and not get my PhD and probably just spend that time researching books and writing YouTube videos and then telling people about the things that I've researched and studied and found on YouTube and make money that way. But I I think it's sort of like the retreatism of a lot of Christianity. It's very similar. Like, I feel like a lot of conservatives have retreated from academia because they're afraid of 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 maybe the work or the financial load or whatever it is, and instead they've let it be overtaken, like the academic spaces just be overtaken by people who don't align with us, like value wise, who don't like
mm.
Christianity, who don't like the West, who don't appreciate what their ancestors gave them. And that's what I think you and I are doing with writing our stories, is we're trying to sort of take a little bit of that conversation back and say, actually, no, the traditions are good. The values that founded the West are actually good and important and should be kept around.
But that's why I wonder if like the real thing that needs to happen then is creating parallel institutions,
Hmm,
right? Like the fact is Harvard's not going to like us anyway because we're
that's
Christian
true.
or right wing, right? So like what at this point the ability to take it back for our side, even though I admire many people who are trying to do that sort of thing, like it's been well known that the way you fight back against these the takeover of your institutions is by making parallel institutions, and then the stronger those become, they become to have more legitimacy than the older ones do. So yeah,
That's
like from
true.
a strategy perspective, like that's to me that feels much more valuable. Again, that's why like what so many other religiously minded groups like Angel Studios or like heck, even the Daily Wire or something are creating like the Pendragon cycle and such, right? Why? Because there's a
True.
huge group of people like you and me who are just completely fed up with everything Hollywood's doing and we want better movies. So, yeah, to me, like, I just kind of have this cynical thought of like the institutions are lost and we got to build our own.
Well, I agree, but I guess the reality there is, it's like, like for I'll use like sort of from a Protestant perspective. I'll use Martin Luther as an example.
Mhm.
Martin Luther was a Catholic priest. He was well trained. He was academically versed in the Catholic
Mm.
religion and in the Catholic institutions, which is how he was able to come out of them and start his well ultimately he was forced out of the institutions and he had to create his own to survive. But um that sort of situation is kind of where I'm coming from is yes, it'd be nice to create institutions, but where will the validity of those institutions come from? Because
That makes sense.
like right now you could go take courses at well I don't know if PragerU actually offers courses, but like Hillsdale College, for example,
Right.
or Bob Jones University. Like there are more right leaning places. And even my own college that I went to for a year, West Coast Baptist College in California. The issue with that is I want to be an academic, and a lot of places like that don't offer liberal academics as sort of a career path, and so I've now reoriented myself to going through a much more traditional liberal university. That way, when I come out the other end with my doctorate, I can stand and say, well, I have my doctorate from such and such established, well founded, well accredited
Mm.
institution. And so now I'm going to break away from those institutions and go and do my own thing because what they're doing is completely wrong and corrupt. And so
That's
like
interesting.
it's almost like Jordan Peterson, right? Dr. Jordan Peterson got his doctorate from a Canadian liberal university, but he didn't
Right.
let that liberty that or he didn't let that university training brainwash him into giving up his values. He still studied the philosophy, studied the literature, and came out the other end with a mind to build something for young men and a with the accreditation and with the legitimacy of having a doctorate from an established university. So that's just kind of like my take on that. But
That's
um
interesting.
it's just kind of like where do you get the legitimacy from? Like obviously you can build it yourself. Like you can
Yeah, but you're
credentialize
nobody. Like
yourself, but you're
exactly. Yeah.
nobody. Who cares? Exactly. Yeah, so it's tough, but cool. So I think yeah, I mean, thanks for talking, man. This was a lot of fun. Uh, one last thing I did want you to say. It's kind of you might sort of recognize the heart of the question, but it's a different question than my usual last question is.
Hmm.
Um, do you have any words of inspiration that you'd like to share with any up and coming writers, novelists, artists?
Hmm. That's a great question. Um. Well, I'll default to the typical thing I do, which is saying, "Hey, read more C.S. Lewis."
Okay.
um, yeah, I mean, look, we all admire Tolkien. Tolkien's fantastic. But we often forget that the only reason Lord of the Rings got created was because Lewis pushed him to make it. I and I know this is not something that many people would agree with, but I am of the opinion that Lewis was probably a bigger genius than even Tolkien. And the only way to understand that is to go kind of start looking into what he did with the Narniad, I might say, Planet Narnia theory with Michael Ward and all that jazz, Narnia Code, that all stuff. To me, that's where I've gotten my inspiration and how to write. And I tell people like, if you really want to know how to write a meaningful story, study Lewis, study what he did and why he did what he did. Um, and I think that there's a reason for that. Intricate world building, great stuff. Um, you trying to in pulling from ancient myths and just remixing them or whatever, good stuff. But I just don't think on that your own that's going to create something that's truly profound and of high artistic value and high meaning. In order to do that, you need to understand what Lewis meant when and what Ward is talking about with like the kappa elements and symbolism. Um, so to me, like if you want to write a good story, there's two books I'd recommend: just Planet Narnia and The Language of Creation by Mathieu Pajot.
Okay. I mean, I can't argue with that. Like, definitely, if you're an up and coming fantasy artist, honestly, any kind of art, noveling, storytelling, short stories, actual like drawn art, what we would consider more fantastic art, I I can't recommend Lewis enough.
Yeah.
Even just like to be fair, because I don't want to be a hypocrite. I haven't read his any of his more philosophical work, like the Screwtape Letters or the Mere Christianity, but even
Mm.
just the standard issue Chronicles of Narnia. There's so much to be learned from just the Chronicles of Narnia themselves, like how, for example, how he ends the last battle in the
Yeah.
Silver Chair, like it or is it
Oh
the
yeah.
Silver Chair or no? I think it is called the
The
last
last
battle.
battle. Yeah. The
Yeah,
last.
so how he ends that book, with who he allows in Aslan's country, who he implies
Mm.
isn't there, how he world builds Aslan's country, like there's so much to be learned and gained
Oh yeah.
from studying even just his more fantastical works. And I mean, I haven't read it, but I can imagine Planet Narnia theory and these other um grander, more they sound almost like academic books on Lewis, like those would
Planet
be
Narnia is
worth your
pretty
time.
academic, yeah. But
Yeah.
the Narnia Code book though, that's more of an everyman book as I understand it. I have to confess though, Al, I actually haven't read Planet Narnia yet. I've just been talking about it a lot with a lot of my brothers and sisters in the monastery because we
Hmm.
love Lewis a lot and we talk about these ideas a lot. So it's just something I live and breathe.
Yeah.
But I do actually just need to properly sit down and read it sometime.
Agreed. Me too. It's rough. It's rough out here.
I know, man.
So many books, so few hours in the day.
My backlog for like different video games is
Oh,
ever growing.
don't get me started on video games. Like my bookshelf alone, let alone my video game library. Like
Oh,
Steam is crying in the background right now.
I know,
Uh,
man.
um,
I think you've seen that meme like my body is a machine that turns like discount 99 cents into 0 hours played.
into 0 hours played. That's
Like that
yes.
that hurts, man.
It's 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 very real though. It's
Oh goodness.
cool. Well, I appreciate you being on the show. Uh,
Oh, Al, thank you so much for having me. This was absolutely fun.
yeah.
Yeah, totally. And yeah, I think you and I we're getting together on my podcast, the Circle Dwellers,
Yep.
February, right?
Coming up in February. Yes, I'm very excited for that.
Oh yeah, that's gonna be fun.
And yeah, so thanks for being on the show. Like I always say to everybody who I have on the show, you're always welcome back. Feel free to come back anytime for anything, any of the ideas that I'm peddling. If they interest you for a show title or anything, feel free to come back. I love to have you on, and you always bring up a nice perspective to things, that I always appreciate. And
Thanks.
so, real quick, where can people find your work? Where can people listen to you, subscribe to you, support you?
hmm Yeah. So I mentioned that I do a podcast with my brother Timothy,
Mm,
who is actually here listening. So
he
hi, Tim.
is
But yeah, we do a religious podcast together on YouTube. It's called the Circle Dwellers podcast. I say it's religious podcast, but we talk about everything
hmm
on there. We had an episode on aliens the other day. We had an episode on art. We had an episode on like why veganism is stupid.
based.
Hot take, I know. But yeah, so we cover all sorts of cool stuff. It's fun. So sometimes discipleship, religious stuff. Sometimes just like commentary on something that interests us. So fun if you like. You want to hear two monks talk about random stuff. That's a great spot. Obviously, I'm here on X. I'm trying to make nice, high quality posts that would be entertaining instead of just random shenanigans. If you follow me on X though, I will send you the first chapter of my book for free. Um, and my website, if it matters, is mattckrell.com. And yeah, I think that's all the plugs.
Very cool. Yeah, I would highly recommend follow Matthew here and get to that first free chapter. I will warn you though, if you like shorter stories, it might not be for you because he is a bit like, but it's not long winded. It's full of great content. It's
Well, I actually, well, Al, the first chapter I sent you, I ended up like breaking into like four more chapters, so
Hey,
it's
there you
actually much
go.
smaller
There you
now.
go. Cool. Okay, in that case, I retract my statement. Definitely go go follow him. Give that chapter a read. It'll be worth your time, I'm sure. Uh,
Yeah.
for
Thanks for giving me
myself,
the idea.
yeah. And
I got
hey,
the
you
idea
know
from you,
what?
so
That's I and you know what? To be fair, I got the idea from somebody else. So nothing new under the sun, as they say. Uh, and if you're interested in following this show, if you're listening to this show, why aren't you already following? But that is what it is. If you're just now realizing that that button down there is red and you haven't subscribed yet, go ahead and
hmm
subscribe to the YouTube channel. That's AB Timothy on YouTube. And follow the podcast on Spotify. That's the Keeping the Beacon Lit podcast on Spotify. If you just look up Keeping the Beacon Lit, it'll be there. You can find all these links on my link tree in my bio here on X. I have the same policy. If you follow me on X and X decides to notify me, I will send you a free chapter. If you follow me and you don't get a free chapter in like a week, feel free to mention me. Like spam me, spam my mentions on X, and like be the squeaky wheel that gets the grease, my friends. Um, and other than that, if you're interested in short form content like short stories, blog posts, or reviews, uh, check out my website. That's abtimothy.com. Again, that's abtimothy.com if you're interested in those more written, shorter form, informational, and sometimes just fun sort of outreaches there. Yeah, that's about all I have, I believe. So, as always, have a great week, and remember to keep the beacons lit.